So now we're going to look at rejected records. Correcting or resolving rejected records is part of any batch file submission process. We're going to demonstrate how to view rejected records, how to use filter options to select rejected records, and then demonstrate the steps in resolving these records. Now, we're only going to do a handful because the focus is on the iterative nature of submitting files and whittling down the errors until we have 100% passed records. That's the methodology that we hope to impart. If you go to our YouTube channel, specific frequent errors that come up, we have demonstrations on how to resolve those, but this is more or less a process of file submission of how to resolve those errors. So here we're on the view submission detail screen, and we have a view of our errors and warnings. Each individual error type that has triggered is here, and a count of how many errors there are. You can see that we have 4 errors, but only 3 rejected records. So that means a single rejected record has multiple errors. This is not uncommon. It's something for you to understand. You could submit a file with a single record, and that file can trigger on multiple or even every data element, right? And so a file like the SINF that has several different fields, you could be in the tens of errors and only submit a single record. That's not likely, but it can happen, right? And so sometimes you have to correct multiple data elements in a single record, okay? Also, you have the view submission error report. And so because we will be correcting these errors in our student information system, sometimes you don't want to leave CalPads open, or maybe you only have a single monitor, and it's easiest just to print out this report, save it electronically, or perhaps print it a hard copy on the printer. As you can see, the report is just like the summary. It has the student's information, so you can go back into your student information system and look the student record up. And it has an error description and the error, okay? Then it has a summary of the total errors. Just as I said, we have 4 total errors and 3 rejected records. And you can see that Jimbo Jones is the culprit that has conflicting data generating 2 errors, okay? So you could print this up in probably a PDF, Excel, or Word format, however it's easiest for you to reference later. So I have let's start with the SINF 0036, invalid country and state province code. Okay, so this is Jimbo Jones. CSIS Training Berkeley is the school. The error code is SINF 0036. This is used for reference in the error list. Here's an error description, invalid country state code combination, and then student birth country code. Okay, so the problem is that this name or this error description isn't enough if I'm unfamiliar with the error to do anything. I don't know why it says invalid state country code. So what do you need a reference? At the bottom of your screen, you have the CalPads error list. It's downloading. Once it downloads, you open it up. Here it is. Here's the latest copy of the CalPads error list. At the bottom, you see tabs. So I'm going to scroll for student information, and I'm going to sort for 36, SINF 36. Okay, here are the details with regards to that error. So here's the invalid country and state code combination. I like to say, looking at the error description tells you the problem. Student birth country code and student birth state province code must be a valid combination. Fields validated, student birth state province code, the student birth state country code. So the fields validated is where we're going to either make a comparison or look to see if we can see the invalid combination. Sometimes we have to make a comparison between CalPads data and a rejected record. In this case, we will only be needing to look at the rejected record. Suggested resolution, this gives us an idea how we may resolve the problem. Change either the student birth state province code or the student birth state country code. See the CalPADS system documentation page, that's what this link is, or the CalPADS valid code combinations document. Okay, so that's some good information. So let's open up the record. We suggest that you always open up the errors in detail. And we're looking for the field of validation, the student birth state province code and the student birth country. So we're going to scroll through this error until we see, okay, here's the student birth state province code, and then the student's birth country code, okay? So it says the student's from California, at least that's what I intended to say. Let's see, or let's try to find out what's the problem, okay? So it told us to reference the valid code combinations document. So I'll close this temporarily, and you see that there's a valid code combinations document here. So you could download the valid code combos, and there's no need to do it every time. If you download it once, you should save it to your desktop, and it should be available for quick reference. And so here's the valid code combinations document. Just like the error list, it's an Excel spreadsheet that's tabbed at the bottom. And so I'm looking for student birth state province and country code. So I didn't see anything there. State, province, and country. All right. And so as I'm looking at this document, I see that CA is a valid country code, and I can filter. And so for this country, aha, I can see what my problem is. CA country code is Canada, and the prefix to the state is Canada AB, Alberta, Canada BC, British Columbia, Canada ON, Ontario, okay? And so I think that's my problem. If I remember correctly, I opened this record, instead of California, I said this student was from US, that's the birth state, but the country code is Canada. I was thinking state, and I can see that I made a mistake. If I don't know what this code is, I would reference the CalPADS code set. Every code is in the code set. And so you can see that we have a valid code combinations document in front of us again. Now, there's another way we can do this. The student birth state province code is USCA. I can come here for the state province code and look for USCA. So I'm going to unselect them all. I'm going to scroll through for USCA. And I can see that the only valid combination is US, United States. So that makes sense to me now, right? That's an easy fix. I'm going to go back to my student information system and correct this record, okay? So I don't necessarily have a student information system, but I do have an Excel spreadsheet that I use to submit this file, and I'm going to make the correction there. So you can simulate that or think of that as me going back to my student information system and correcting that record. Let's find that spreadsheet. So here's my spreadsheet, right? This is what I use to upload my data. Certainly you all would have a student information system, or hope you would. And let me find Jimbo Jones. Okay, here's Jimbo Jones. We're looking at Jimbo Jones' record. Here is the province code, and the country code right next to it. And instead of CA, it's going to be US, right? I'm going to save my changes. And at this point, I can resubmit my file. Now, here's the thing. I may want to go and correct all the data in my student information system that was indicated as incorrect prior to submitting the file. However, what I want to show you is that sometimes we make corrections and they don't have the desired impact that we would like. And so we have to submit the file a second, a third, a fourth time, but we're going to whittle down our errors. That's why this process is iterative, okay? So I want to preserve this page just for my own inconvenience. and I'm going to open in a new tab, and I'm pretty much just going to submit this file again. Okay, and file upload, student information, submission number 2, choose the file. It was recently saved. Okay, so that's done. We've submitted that file, and we'll wait just a few minutes, and we'll see if we've done any better. Okay, so one thing we can do is filter just for student information files. So you can see that the initial submissions without any error correction, we have 3 rejected records, right? And in that file, when we look at the details, we see that we had a total of 3 rejected records, but 4 errors. We see we have 4 individual errors, right? So now we're in process. We were first in queue, now we're in process. So pretty soon we should be ready for review. And I'll just click F5 to refresh to see if the status has changed. And so we're in ready for review, and I can see that now I only have 2 rejected records. And so let's review this submission. And I'm down to 2 errors. I changed 1 data element and I corrected 2 errors. So let's go back here. I was working on a SINF 0036, and this invalid country state code combination that I changed to my student information resolved this error and the SINF 0061. You see that? In my second submission, both of those errors are gone. All I was intending to do was change the SINF 0036. So let's look here at this error. We'll open up the detail. SINF 0061, missing enrollment US less than 3 years cumulative indicator. Enrolled in US school less than 3 years. Okay, so that's the field. Let's find that field. Enrolled in US school less than 3 years. It's missing. Why is that an error? Well, what we should do is go back to the error list. Here it is. Go to student information and find 61, SINF 61. And it gives us the background. Again, we use the number and the name for reference, but to find the problem, we look at the error description. If a student's birth country code is not equal to the United States, US, or Puerto Rico, or unknown or blank, then the US school less than 3 cumulative years indicator must be populated. If the student country code is not equal to US, Puerto Rico, or unknown, or left blank, then this field must be populated. I'm going to be looking at the student birth country code and the enrolled in US school less than 3 years cumulative indicator. If I don't understand what it's telling me, I have understanding the error. The student information record submitted contains a birth country other than United States, Puerto Rico, or unknown, or blank. That requires a population of the US school enrollment less than 3 cumulative years indicator to be populated. If the student birth country code is correctly populated in the submission, ensure the correct value for the enrolled in US school less than 3 cumulative years indicator is provided in the submitted record. If the birth country code is not correctly populated in the submission, change it so the correct value is submitted to CalPADS. Okay. How do I know if it's the correct value or what the values are? It tells me to go look at the code set and the file specifications document, okay? So I'm gonna do my comparison. I don't have any value. and the country code for the record is CA. Okay, so this is where you go to the CalPADS file specifications document, and I have that handy. So here it is. It's another Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to student information again. I have to set filter. All right, now I'm going to look for enrolled less than 3 years cumulative indicator. Here it is. And I can see what this field is intended or what value should be in here. So the definition says it's an indication whether or not the student has been enrolled in the U.S. school for less than 3 cumulative years. A Y would indicate that the student has been enrolled for less than 3 years. A no would indicate the student has not. All right, so that's where I have to know my student data. Has my student been enrolled less than 3 years? If the student birth country code is not equal to United States, Puerto Rico, or unknown, and the grade level is PS through 12, then yes. So drag this over here, and I can see what my problem was. It wasn't that this field was blank, right? Because it's not required. The correction I made in this record was the student's not from Canada, right? This is US California as the state. In fact, the student was born in the capital of California in Sacramento. I used the wrong birth country code. And so when I was correcting this invalid combination earlier, and I went into my student information system and corrected CA, Canada, to US, and submitted the file again, I resolved 2 errors. I resolved both the SINF 0036, invalid country and state province combination, as well as the missing enrolled in US less than 3 years indicator, because being that the student was correctly reported as being from the United States, this field was not required. And so I feel very good about myself. I intended to resolve 1 error and I resolved 2. So I only have 2 left. Okay, so let's look at the GERR 002, or we call the GER2. GERR stands for general error. Okay. Value not found in the reference set, residential address, state, province code, CA. Residential address, state, province code, CA. I know California is a state. I know Berkeley's in California. I don't understand why this is a problem. So again, I have to go to my error list. That's why you need this document to be kept handy. Okay, and so I have my error list, but I didn't know what number that is. So let's go back up. It's a GER2. I'm in my student information because that's the file I submitted. Let me clear the filter. And now I'm going to look for the GER2. Good, I see it already. GERR 0002. And so the value provided for the field is not a valid value in the CalPADS code set. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. The code I used is not a valid value. It tells me the field's validated. So these are all the fields that the GER2 can trigger on. I know that it triggered on the residential address, state, province code here. Understanding the error, the values that can be submitted in the field must be recognized by CalPADS as one of the set of values that are valid for the field. The submitted file contains values that are not valid. So I understand that. The value I submitted for residential address, state, province code is incorrect. Suggested resolution, reference the CalPADS code set and file specifications document. Okay, so let me go back to the CFS, if need be, the code set. So let's find the CFS. Here it is. And to see what the expectation is for that field, that's why I use this files specifications document. So I'm going to clear my filter, and I'm looking for address, state, province code. So you can see in the CFS, it's just called the address, state, province code. Residential was taken out of it, but that's why we have numbers. It was field.234, and so I used the field number to reference it in the documentation. A coded value representing the abbreviation for a state or province, a state code. So the code I use isn't the correct abbreviation for a state. See state province code in the CalPADS code set. So yet again, I have to find another document because I've done this quite a few times. I have the code set handy, okay? We'll clear the filter. And the field value we're looking for is address, state, province code. See state, province code, okay? Let's type in state. Nothing. Let's clear these filters. Aha. Let's try it again. State, province, that's the field I'm looking for. Okay. And so I'm looking for the proper code, residential state province code, CA. So I'm looking for California. So let's find California in here. Okay, here's the state of California. The coded value is US-CA. I used CA. So I can see that this code is invalid. So I have to go to the student's record in my student information system and make the change. So this student is Royal Purple Quiche. So again, just a reminder, I don't have a student information system, but I do have an Excel spreadsheet that I'm using to populate my student information data. So we're simulating going to your student information system, finding the student record for Royal Quiche. Here's Royal Purple Quiche, and the resident province code was incorrect. And so there's a degree of knowledge that you must have. You must be able to map the CalPADS fields to your student information system as well, okay? Here's the residential state address code. If this was my student information system, I would just be correcting this field here. And I'm gonna save this. Now, I'm not going to upload this yet. Why? Because I have another error that I want to resolve, I want to correct, and that's the GER 005. LEA does not have ownership of the student enrollment to make the update. So let's examine this record. I open it, I see olive green, catfish, Bruce Banner. Okay, none of this makes any sense. What does this tell me? LEA does not have ownership of student record to make the update. There's no field name, no field value. This is useless. What do I do with this? That's why the first step is always to consult the CalPADS error list, right? So I'm in the student information record. I'm going to find the error list. I'm going to tab at the bottom to student information. We're already there. And I'm looking for the GER 5. Here it is. Here's the GER 5. LEA does not have ownership to make enrollment update. The student information effective start date and end date ranges does not align with the LEA's enrollment. The comparison fields, the fields validated are the enrollment start date, the enrollment exit date, the effective start date, and the effective end date, okay? Understanding this error. This data integrity error between what was submitted and what is already in CalPADS, the effective start date, the effective date range does not overlap with the student's enrollment dates in CalPADS. The effective start date and the effective end date of this record do not overlap with the student's enrollment dates in CalPADS. So that tells me I have to look in the CalPADS ODS to make this comparison, not just my rejected record. An LEA owns or is able to maintain student information from the date their student's primary enrollment starts in the LEA until 1 day prior to the student's start date of the primary enrollment in a subsequent LEA. Things to check for. Look at the rejected record in detail. Note the effective start date and the effective end dates and compare to the enrollment dates in CalPADS. Okay, so here's my rejected record. I need to look at the enrollment record for my student, so I'm just going to copy this SSID and do a search. Okay, now we're going to resize the window so we can do a side-by-side comparison. So bear with me. So if you have multiple monitors, it's easy doing this in separate windows, but if you have a single monitor, you can do 2 screens. Okay, so I have 2 screens here. And the error list told me to look at the effective start date and end dates because they do not align with the enrollment record, okay? So the enrollment start date is 8/3/2020 and the enrollment exit date is 8/20/2020. And the student has left. I can see the problem. I've submitted an effective start date of 8/20 for this student at CSIS Training Berkeley, right? Because the student is attending CSIS Berkeley Training High. However, when I look in CalPADS, there's no record for that enrollment. I can't submit demographic records for a student that was never enrolled in my LEA. And as far as CalPADS is concerned, the student was never enrolled in the LEA. You see that? So either I need to submit my student enrollment and post that record here so that I can then submit the demographic information, the program information, or the student English language information, or I need to verify in my student information system that I have the correct effective start date and that there in fact was an enrollment and this record should be submitted. I understand my discrepancy. I don't have ownership to submit this student information because I have not established ownership through an enrollment period in CalPADS. This student was last enrolled at CSIS Training Oakland Unified, and my account is with CSIS Training Berkeley Unified. So I understand what the problem is, and I cannot resolve that error without first submitting an enrollment file. So what I'm going to do is I am going to post the record that I did correct. I don't have a problem per se, I just don't have the ownership. That's an enrollment record that I need to submit. So let me go ahead and save. And this is why I say it's an iterative process. You're going to make several iterations of submissions for a single file type, most likely when you're resolving errors. So file upload, here it is. And as you get practice, as you understand the requirements, it becomes easier and easier. You have less errors because you know the data that's required. All right, so we've submitted the file again. Let's filter for just student information files. We can see the upload successful message. So here's the initial submission. We had 17 pass records. We corrected one, tried to file again. We submitted a second time. We improved to 18, and we'll see how we do with this next submission. All right, so let's F5 to refresh and see if our file's ready for review. And okay, so you can see the progress. Through our iterations, we've gone from 3 errors to 2, now to 1. Let's review. And the only error we have left is LEA does not have ownership of the student. That's what we've anticipated, right? Subsequently, I've gone back and I've corrected my record. I've enrolled the student. And so all that we need to do now is resubmit the SINF file again. The data that was there for my student information was correct, I have omitted to enroll the student. So I think this last iteration, this last submission, I should be able to submit the file and have no rejected records. So let's see if that is true. Okay. And so while this is processing, we can look at our previous submission. Okay. And remember, we had a GER 5. We submitted a record where the effective start date didn't coincide with the student's enrollment record. And if you remember, it's because we're submitting records for CSIS Training Berkeley, and the student was enrolled at a different LEA, CSIS Training Oakland Unified, right? And so we can see the student's enrollment record here. It shows that the student, well, here's the most recent enrollment, and you can see it says CSIS Berkeley Unified at the top, and the CSIS Training Oakland Unified at the bottom. Also notice that my start date coincides with the effective start date, okay? And so that record will be effective on the date of the enrollment, which is the proper way to align your demographics and your enrollment. And then if you do notice that there's a conflict here, right? The student cannot be enrolled in 2 districts at once. I'm going to send an email and ask them to update their records. I know my student began on 8/20/2020. This is causing a CCE. Review your anomaly trainings for information about CCE, but it's an anomaly. It's a conflict that you will see on your certification report. However, if you're sure your enrollment date and your information is correct, you can contact the other LEAs and say, hey, my enrollment paperwork shows the student's first day of attendance was 8/20/2020. Can you confirm the last day of attendance? Because this date should represent the last day of attendance, the last day the student generated ADA. Typically, the receiving LEA has the correct information because they know the date of the enrollment. Hopefully, the student didn't exit without a proper exit, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they just don't show up. And so you want to make sure that you have the last date either of attendance or according to a SAR process, depending on your exits, okay? That's a different training for a different day. The point is, we've enrolled a student at CSIS Training Berkeley Unified. I'm anticipating having ownership of that record, all right? So we'll go back to view submission. Here's our most recent submission, 20 passed records, 0 rejected records. Awesome, I feel relieved. At this point, I click view and I'm done with rejected records, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and post these records, but we'll save that for the next module.